welcome to the Collector RC. Okay, we're going to do episode number 4 for the big push. And as you can see, we have a few things laid out on the table. And we're outdoors, so you're going to hear some background noise, birds, animals, vehicles, all that kind of cool stuff. So for this video, and this is kind of probably a pretty important one, we're going to talk about tires. That's pretty touchy subject, but also I think it can be a lot of, hopefully we can provide some information with tires. We've done a lot, and if you've seen a lot of our videos, we have focused, I think, a few videos on just tires alone. And then we're going to focus a little bit on motors, and then we'll talk a little bit about some of the mods, but we're going to compare a couple different motors. And then the last thing for this one, we're going to talk about extensions. The Y.R Racing steel front and rear center drive shafts. So hopefully they're the right part and they'll fit in the Jeep. So first, we're going to go ahead and start off with kind of the smaller end of things, but we're going to talk about extensions. And we have a couple different ones here to kind of show you. And there's quite a big variety of them. But we have the Treal here, the +5 Treal. Not so much for doing brand specific, but that's one variation. And then we also have, I believe, I can't remember the brand actually on the top of my head, but this is another type. It's also a +5 and just a different variation of extension. This one is a slightly weighted, but not really, where the Treal is definitely weighted. So it's definitely, we definitely do recommend doing the extensions. You'll love them, yeah, especially if you're going with the weight. You want a way to kind of, here's the other thing too. So when you're doing extensions, you're giving yourself more surface coverage on the ground, right? So using physics, when you're adding weight and then giving more articulation, you'll find that giving you more surface area, then you can push your articulation further than you would be able to if you didn't have that. And then it also kind of helps displace all the weight that you're going to put on your vehicle. So it's kind of one of the reasons why we recommend it. It is definitely a huge improvement, especially if you're going to go into crawling. That's definitely something you're going to want to do. So with the, adding the extensions and then, what you're doing is the surface area is basically the counter towards doing articulation. So if you go too far with articulation without having too much of a surface area, you're just going to create yourself to tip over and fall into situations where you're going to not be able to pull yourself out, where either your tires can slip down because they're heavy, especially if you're doing weighted wheels. Your tires will slip down into the holes, so you'll have to pour more. You're also requiring your motors to work a little bit harder to kind of pull around dead weight. So you got to think of it that way. So giving yourself more surface area gives you a little bit more strength, gives you more area to crawl. Kind of also gives you a little bit more choices as you're pushing through your area, your obstacles as well. And then, so going into that, we'll go right into the tires. So there's quite a few options out there. There's obviously ones that are going through in and out of phases of popularity. I believe right now the Mudslingers are one of the popular ones, but before it was a different one. So, originally it was, I remember when Rocklocks were these ones here. They were one of the most popular ones at one point, and you couldn't find them anywhere. And then people, us and I think a few other people started to realize, we did a video on them, that they were actually quite small. And they actually took away from, let's say with the Jeep stock tires, the Nittos, I think, they actually took away your ability to crawl over things because you just didn't have the clearance. Now doing high clearance and that kind of stuff, you can counter some of that and still be able to use them. They're not bad tires. Crawling ability, the tread and pattern, everything on them are great. They're basically mini Hyrex. That's if you look at the pattern the way they are literally mini Hyrex. So going into that as well, you have like these are the Rock Lizards. Obviously they're the ones that were not glued, and they have the Treal field locks in them. These are the non-weighted versions, but they do have weighted versions, and that's if you again go into the rotational weight. These are the stock versions to the Betty, which are obviously glued, not really weighted at all, and they're pretty nice. these do not have foams in them, so that's why you kind of get that little bit of squeeze. So then you have like with the mudslingers, gives you a bit of traction, especially towards wet and going through dirt and or mud. Hence the reason why they're called mudslingers. But you have a lot of options, and some of the things you got to consider again was with the obstacles and habitat area that you're climbing in or driving through. The tread patterns make a big difference. Some of the things that we kind of do, we like to mess around. We've been called out on it, and I'm surprised it took a while for people to realize we like to mess around with the way the treads are. So sometimes we'll put our tires on reverse, the tread reverse, and sometimes we'll kind of mix them up a little bit. Just we're testing things out, because sometimes with the smaller cars, even in 110s, they tread pattern can change, because they're more of a robotic device than they are an actual driving one-to-one vehicle. So it's the kind of way I look at them. Each of us are a little bit different in our perspective in that, but that's why you see that changed around. So, and I encourage it. You'll find out some pretty interesting results in doing that. But so the other thing with the tires too is size. You're gonna obviously going with the bigger sizes is definitely a benefit, but at the same time, if you go too big, you're giving yourself that lift that's going to be too high, and if you're not countering that, so you got to be aware of that. When you have the extension, you're giving yourself that surface area. The bigger tires will really help, especially if you can get even bigger and you can go monster truck style. But definitely something you're going to consider is in size. We've gone through, you can go back in one of our older videos. We've gone through and measured a whole bunch of different comparisons, not a whole bunch, but a few different comparisons. And we've actually come to the point, that's why you see a lot of these, the Rock Blizzards, these actually are choice tires. They, so far, we've gotten the best performance out of them. They're relatively good on size. They've so far had more pros than cons. So, and you do see the holes in there. If you don't know, one of the things we've had to do is, because these fit on here so well, they needed to get the air out of there. So that's pretty much the overall information you'll need to know about tires, and we can go a lot more into depth with that, because really, there's so many other different factors. A lot of other things good to go too is your width, size, your tires, and all that kind of stuff. But so far on the market, to what we've liked, we've seen the the mudslingers, all that kind of stuff, and they're great and they're cool. And they probably big in size and that kind of stuff. But so far, what we've climbed on, whether it be indoor or even outdoor, these have been our choice. So that's just our recommendation. But there are a lot of different. There's even a lot of other YouTubers out there who have done different tires and different combinations of stuff. So I highly recommend. Like when you're shopping for insurance, those of you that shop for insurance, you kind of go through a bunch of different ones and find the best one. So we highly recommend going out there and kind of just broaden your horizon on knowledge on different ideas of tires. Things we do recommend definitely are the Treal bead locks, because they are definitely they're really nice. Not only do they give you the eye candy, which is not where we're going with this, but they also, performance wise, they handle really well, especially if you're going to go for the weighted ones. They're pretty nice. They do have a lot of screws, just warning you now, they have a lot of screws. But so do the 1.9s. If you've seen those, oh boy, a lot of screws in those too. But I've seen worse. All right, so the next thing. So we went into the extensions, which the extensions kind of lead into the different tires you're going to use and that kind of stuff, different sizes, and there's there's a bunch of options of tires. So all of that leads into what you're going to do for like your motor. Now, there's a big. Obviously, the number one concern is that by applying all this weight, whether it be rotational or whatever kind of weight it is, you're putting a lot of wear and tear on your stock motor, which this is a stock motor. And yes and no. We very much believe that it's a hit and miss for a lot of people, because for us, we've got nothing but we've had longevity in all of our motors, all of our stock motors. We do have to replace them over time, because man, we put a lot of drive time. There's a lot of hours, a lot of miles on these little guys. But I've only with the Jeep, went through originally with the stock motor that lasted about 5 to 6 months of consistent driving, literally driving about 5 to 6 days a week, and doing courses. So that motor eventually burnt out, and then I went into the barrage, and that's the next thing we're going to talk about with this. I went ahead and did the barrage, and it was before they had all the mod stuff to make sure it would fit better. And I got to, I ended up having to do my own mod to get it in there. It worked great. Here's kind of what we evaluated between the comparisons when we were driving them against the other stock Jeeps. So around the same. The Cuz has a Jeep that's around the same weight area as mine. So comparing them during that time when we had them, I would say you get about a 2% speed increase, you get about 2% torque, and probably about a 0.5% overall longevity. And I only give the 0.5 in longevity because, you're getting the +2 in your torque, your +2 in your speed, and that kind of helps it in long run. But overall, it's not, and this is just our opinion, you don't, definitely do your own experiment. We don't actually recommend doing the barrage. And I know that may seem like a shocker, but it's just, if you think about it, for cost and what you have to do to change the setup, you're not going to get a whole lot. The improvement isn't worth enough to us. Longevity wise, the barrage lasted 5 to 6 months, and I didn't drive it as much during that time, but it did have a little bit, maybe a little bit more weight. So overall, it kind of equaled out. But longevity wise, it just kind of burnt out at the same time. The torque wasn't enough to notice a whole lot. And then the speed was okay, but we weren't really building these for speed. So that's why we continued. So then eventually, after that motor burnt out, and I actually burnt out at an event right before, 2 minutes before, I gotta say, this was going to go into its first ever little drive event thing. And it was during summer last year. So, and no, that didn't give me a bad taste towards barrage. But it ended up burning out during that time. So then we went back to stock in there. So that's what's in there now. It's just the stock 88T. And then I have another one just in case this one burns out. But so far, you've seen what I've done with this. You've seen how much weight's in here. And you've seen our obstacles, and it's still going. So I haven't had to switch it yet. And we haven't had a problem. And it's been quite a few months already. So it's really for cost, anywhere. I think this is $5, $6. Typically, I know some people are selling a little bit more. For its cost effectiveness, it's kind of one of those parts that's deemed replaceable. Kind of like when you have an arm on one of your bashers, in that you don't go metal because if it bends, that's going to replace expensive parts. Might as well just keep going with the tougher plastic, cheaper. So that's the same idea that we have with the motor. There are options. You can go brushless. So that's kind of the thing. If you're going to go ahead and upgrade it, just upgrade it. Really upgrade it. Do the brushless conversions, which would modify it. It's a mod. And really truly give it that actual upgrade, because really honestly, the barrage isn't going to give you as much of an upgrade as you might think it would. You might think that it would do. It's just not worth the effort, basically, we think. But yeah, so that's kind of the idea that we have here. And, it's basically just where we want to go. So let's go ahead, and I'm going to go ahead and install this. We're going to do it, obviously, hyperlapse, because we don't need to see here. I was going to work on it talking, but I think it's just simpler to explain things in more detail. Otherwise, I'd lose focus. So as much as we like to think we are, there's no such thing as multitasking. It's impossible. But let me go ahead and we'll do this, and I got a few things to kind of touch up on some of these before we end it, and then we're going to go ahead and drive it as well. So. Okay, so now that we've got everything, we got the Racing steel center drive shafts installed. They're pretty nice. I'll show you there. And yeah, I did end up putting one of them backwards. That's okay though. This car doesn't typically see mud anyway, so the dirt won't really get in there. And it was unavoidable. So as you can see here where we're at, I mean, we've just got a lot of upgraded and changed over stuff. like we said before, doing the extensions, we're gonna go ahead and we'll install these, the Treal +5s. Some of the things you have to watch out for specifically with extensions, and is that, you know, we had our first casualty of it, and we actually can show you some damage here that it caused. You can see the scraping and all that kind of stuff that happened there. Kind of wore down all the black powder coat kind of stuff they have on there. So what happens is that when you're putting these on, and you can see that little bit there, it puts a lot of pressure on your bearings. It actually puts all of the pressure on your bearings. And as have you noticed that especially with these kind of setup tires with the Treal, they have this style, basically a little nut that goes in, it slides in and it kind of tightens down the whole tire. Well, unfortunately, using the extensions, even these extensions here are the same thing. All those little riser parts right here, those go all the way, all that pressure is on those bearings. So that is something to consider when you're doing the extensions. You can go with the hot racing if you can get them to work, but understand with the hot racing that we found, unfortunately never even got to use mine because they didn't come, they were missing it was missing a hole for one of the pins. They didn't they didn't drill out a hole. And we ended up going through quite a few bar bits to do it because it's such a small, tiny little thing. We just didn't really, anyway. But know that a lot of that hot racing extension, the +4, it deals with changing out the internals of your axle, and it also isn't really compatible with some other brands. So just be aware of that as well. All right, so tires are on. You can see got a little more girth in there. We are going to go ahead and get rid of this the front shock or the front spring. Go ahead and go into the stiffer spring because we have all that weight. And remember the last video with the shocks, we were talking about that. So you can see, you know, it gives a lot more freedom there. Where this has, oh, I'm not even showing you, but see here, moves a little more. It's a little bit stiffer. I know it's hard to tell. I don't know if we'll be able to tell you here, but you can kind of see a little bit. It kind of throws that back up slower. So we'll do that. I'll do that off the camera, and then we'll go ahead and drive it around a little bit, since I haven't got to drive too much. But I think it's a beautiful day. I get out there and drive it a little bit, right? So let's do that.